Hello again, everyone, and in this lesson we're going to be talking about BeautifulSoup and how to parse web pages. So in the previous lesson, you looked at how to request a web page, get a response back, convert that to text. That's the first step in parsing HTML data, and BeautifulSoup will do that for you. So we've been using the important phone numbers web page from Tri-C, and I've posted some videos on an introduction to HTML and CSS and selectors and developer tools, but kind of just a quick refresher. If you right-click on the web page and inspect or view source. Let me close that first. Right-click, view page source. You'll see the source of the web page. This is what we're targeting here. This is what we want to look at, especially for the lab when we look at all these phone numbers. This is the markup for the web page. There's also developer tools in Chrome and Firefox and Internet Explorer. If you right-click and go to Inspect, you can open up those developer tools. And this is a very rich set of tools that allow you not only to view the source of a web page, to change data within elements, edit CSS. If we scroll up here, you can see editing CSS. Now, before we get into BeautifulSoup, we need to understand HTML and the way how markup works. So each web page begins obviously with an HTML tag, and underneath it are child tags of head for the header and body for the body. When I say child tags, again, it's hierarchical. It's a markup language. We can think of these things of parent elements and child elements. So if you want to display something within the body of a web page, you make it the child element of a body. If we go back down to that table with all the phone numbers, let's right-click on a phone number and inspect it. This is a table cell. So you have a table, and underneath the table is a header, so a T head, and a body, T body. Underneath each body are individual rows. You can see them highlight on the left side as I scroll over these items. And within each row are individual columns, which represent cells of a table. So we see the first cell, the second cell, the third cell, the fourth cell, the fifth cell of the first row. So again, you can think of it as a grid pattern. So all of these it's a hierarchy of elements. And what BeautifulSoup does is it goes and grabs that text from your request object, and it parses HTML into a hierarchical set of objects. So we're going to do a little bit of what you're going to do in your lab this week. So let's go back to Python. All right, so I have my shell open here. So we're going to import a couple things here. We're going to import BeautifulSoup or requests again, and BS4 for BeautifulSoup 4. Hit enter. That worked. So let's go grab the web page we were reviewing. And we're going to do it like we did in the previous lab. So response equals requests dot get. All right, and we want to make sure that we are raising an error if we didn't do this properly. So res.raise for status. So again, if this didn't return a 200 OK, we want to raise an exception. And since no exception was raised, that worked. All right, so BeautifulSoup, how do we do it? So we had res.text. So res.text, if we hit enter, it says here, squeeze text 173 lines. We did this in the last video. If we double click this in the Python shell, it's going to show 103 lines of text. That's the HTML of the web page. But now we want to parse the HTML. So let's take this text in your sample code for the week. I wrote catalog page equals bs4.beautifulsoup. So we'll do this right here. We'll save some time. We're going to call this page equals, we'll just catalog page equals the bs4.beautifulsoup. So you'll see here there's two arguments we want to use, or the first two parameters in here. We'll pass in arguments. Markup, so that will be res.text. This is where we pass in the text from the web page into this. And then finally, features, we want to use the HTML parser. You don't need to concern yourself with any of the other parsers in this. We can see we did the same thing in the lab as well. Now we're going to hit enter, and that's it. Your page is now parsed into the BeautifulSoup object catalog page. If we hit enter, you'll see an expanded version of this. If we look at the text from before, you can see this really wasn't parsed or pretty printed or anything like that. Once we run it through BeautifulSoup, it really cleans up the HTML. All right, so we've done that part. Now, what do we do with this? Well, we can actually access the various elements of a web page. So, for instance, we can parse each of the elements. We can look for selectors and so on and so forth. So we'll go through that. So let's say, part of the lab is to look for selectors. So how do we do that? Let's take a look at the web page. All right, so the selector syntax in BeautifulSoup, go back to our code for the week, is .select. So what we can do is go back here and find something interesting. Oh, look. Class equals column 1. So you can take that class selector and we can type in catalog page.select column 1. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. You may run into this. What did I do wrong? So that's a class. And what do class selectors require? A period in front of it. So period column 1. So catalog page.select column 1. Okay, and what is this? It's a list or an array of every result. So everything with class column 1. So what do you do with this? I could do a for element in catalog page column 1 print element dot, as we see here in our code, I believe it's get text. We'll find out. It's the beauty about code. You type it in. You learn so many languages, so much code that sometimes you forget it. And we'll hit enter. And apparently that wasn't it. Oh, that's why. For element in catalog page dot select column 1 print element dot get text. Enter. There we go. So what did we do? We took all these elements that BeautifulSoup compiled and parsed. We said, give me an array or list of all of the elements with the selector column 1 as the class, so dot column 1. And each of these lines represents the text of those. And This is what your lab is doing this week. You're basically iterating through lists of elements. You could do the same thing here. So let's say we want catalog page.select every element that is has the element type TD, and then hit enter. And now we get all of the cells. We could type in catalog page dot select. Give me all elements of row or table. Give me all table elements, and it's a lot of data, but it threw in there all the elements and all their child elements and the children of children, etc., etc. So again, using selector syntax, which I've posted a video of this week, BeautifulSoup will return an array of each of those elements, which you can then use to parse further. So that's really all BeautifulSoup does. It takes HTML elements, parses them, and allows you to use them in a way that's consumable in Python. Now, for the lab this week, you're going to want to use the two things that I showed you here, which we'll talk about in the lab a little bit. But first is select. So you're going to say, hey, I have this selector. Give me all the elements that match the selector. And then iterate through each of those selectors. And you're going to say, get me the text using getText. And that will grab the text. And then you can parse it further. This week in the lab, you're going to use regular expressions to grab the phone number out of it. In this video, I actually probably showed you some lab answers that weren't in the lab. But that's the point of these videos, right? That's the point of doing all this, is you put the information together. This is what you would do in your normal work day. If you didn't know something, you grab information from different sources to find the solution. So with this video, the previous video, and the lab video, I believe that you have a solution for every line. Oh, including the regular expression videos from the previous week. Actually, I think you could use the lab video from the previous week for that solution. So, not much work, not many lines of code you have to write in the lab. It's about piecing together information. Again, highly encourage you, if you haven't gone back, to watch the videos on HTML and selectors and CSS and what it means, because getting that larger understanding of what this is before you go and tackle and use BeautifulSoup, before you go and do the lab, is important if you're not familiar with it.